Zerka Interstellar is proud to introduce the latest iteration of our legendary Apex Vanguard. Our evolutionary combat adaptation system performs real-time analysis of environmental challenges to deliver the ultimate predator. This model features our peak performance amplifier, which dramatically enhances effectiveness right from the get-go.
Hey guys, welcome to the Sith Sorcerer Healing Guide for Corruption Spec, to be specific. This is my second guide, my second attempt here. The first guide, I feel like I left a few things that are important out, and since that guide was released, I have gained a lot more knowledge in healing on my Sith Sorcerer, and have done a lot more endgame content since then. So let's make this new guide, shall we? First thing I want to do is give a shout out to my guild. We are actually on the SWTOR North American English server. We are the Still Court. It's a great guild, great bunch of players. They do everything from PvP to operations to you name it, and we always have a fair amount of people online. Very populated and very fun guild. If you're looking for a good guild, feel free to check us out. Hit me up on this server in game, or just ping me on YouTube or something. Leave a comment below. I can help you get started. Alright, first things first, let's cover the Sith Sorcerer stats. So the two main stats that you're going to be concerned with when gearing is going to be crit and a clarity. So if I'm not saying that right, I really don't give a shit. You know what I'm talking about. It's right here. This is basically your haste, as fast as cooldowns come up and as fast as the casting speed on these abilities. So there is a couple soft caps with a clarity that will affect the speed on your abilities in the GCD. The first one is going to be 1213 is the first tier, and then the next point that you want to reach after that is 2374. 2374 is actually, not, really hard to obtain, but for me personally and my playstyle, and what I think is actually better is just staying around that 1213 cap, so 1213 or higher. I feel like, because any more is going to be basically sacrificing crit, and I think crit is the tits, and I prefer to go with crit because one of our main ability here is getting force surge procs whenever we get crits on our Innervate. And force surge procs can do a lot for us, including give us endless force by using consuming darkness when it triggers every time we crit like that. So I prefer to go with the crit build. Big crits, big heals. That's what it is. So you can kind of see that reflected in my stats right here. Second thing to go over is the tier, or I guess set bonuses. I think the best set to go for is the Revitalized Mystic set. Not only is it the best set in my opinion, but it's also pretty sweet looking. It's got some sweet little visuals on it, some little pulsing effect on there that looks pretty sweet. But yeah, besides looks aside, it gives us 2% mastery for the 2-piece, and the 4-piece reduces the cooldown on our Innervate by 1.5 seconds. And our Innervate is the bread and butter heal, our most important heal that you're going to want to go to basically all the time. You're never going to want this thing up. This should be on cooldown basically 100% of the time. We'll get into that a little bit when we talk about healing though. Okay, so you have a couple gearing options. What I found out the hard way is I was going to use the Revitalized Mystics 4-piece and then get some other set that had, a 2% mastery for a 2-piece as well. So basically I was going to use the 4-piece from this set and then like the 2-piece from another set, like this one for example, Empowered Restores set. But I found out the hard way that the 2% mastery bonus does not stack. So even if you get 2 pieces from this totally different set right here, it will show you that you have the 2-piece bonus, and it'll show you that you have the 2% mastery, but it does not actually apply. Apparently you can't stack those. If you're getting a 2% mastery from one set, you cannot get it from a totally different set. I found out the hard way after, modding out modding out 2 of those pieces to 306 gear, and then realized my mastery wasn't going up at all, so that kind of sucked. But yeah, so hopefully that saves you guys some trouble. So right now I'm basically just running the 6-piece. A lot of content, we won't really have force issues until you get into some harder in-game content or maybe some PvP. But typically force is not an issue for us, but the 6-piece is a good bonus when you get into a lot harder content or PvP. That's when your force might be tested a little bit. But besides that, the only other thing to cover in gear is obviously re-rolling your amplifiers for your specific crafting. The best one is obviously going to be Force Harmonization. That's going to increase all the healing done by all your force abilities, so that is the best roll. If you can get Force Harmonization and as many pieces as you can, I would definitely go with that. But it is RNG, and you are paying tons of gold to re-roll these things, so on some pieces here I sacrificed and went with like periodic restoration. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, most of them you can see, most of my pieces got Force Harmonization, which is going to be the best. Even though, it's 1% is the max bonus, it's still better to have the 1% Force Harmonization versus having 2% of periodic restoration, for example, because this is flat out all your heals. So it's better to have a bonus that's going to apply to all your heals all the time instead of specific types of heals. With that being said, I think that basically covers the gear. I'm not going to cover any augments in this video. That's kind of going to be your last step. I wouldn't worry about getting augments until you fully have all your gear, sets and bonuses and what you want, and you have all your best mods and whatnot inside of there, and you're at the clarity caps that you choose to aim for. I think the augments is basically the last step in gearing your character. So by that time you should probably have a good idea of what you're looking for, so I'm not going to cover that in this guide. Alright, second thing I want to cover real quick that I did not cover on the last guide is the utility points. So, utility points here. I believe going for the utility points that are centered around damage reduction is probably the best way to go, because there's not too many utility points that actually affect healing and healing strength and healing output. There is a couple we'll cover, but for the most part I go with damage reduction, because you're always going to be taking damage, especially in 5-man content. You're going to be pulling a lot of healing aggro, and there's going to be a lot of times you're taking damage. So went with Sith Defiance here, which is all around damage reduction, 3%, can't go wrong there. Next one's Corrupted Flesh, reduces damage taken from all dots, aka periodic effects, 15%. Torturous Tactics lowers the cooldown on our stun, which is Electrocute, which is this guy right here, which you should be using a lot, and we'll cover that coming up. So it lowers the cooldown on our stun, makes your stun better. Here we go. Next here we got Suppression, Activating Cloud Mine, which increases damage reduction. That's another ability that you should be using whenever you're taking damage or you have aggro. We'll cover that more in a second. And here we go. We got this ability right here. I basically went with this because I try to keep Affliction on basically every single target that I'm ever fighting. It's a good way to do some easy damage. It's an instant speed dot, so it doesn't really take away from healing too much or healing uptime. So this is pretty good. That way if you ever get in some trouble, you can easily force speed away or kite something if you need to. But next one's Surging Speed, reduces the cooldown on force speed, something you probably should be using basically all the time. And Force Barrier, another thing that will save your ass, which can also be used in raid mechanics. You know, sometimes you get targeted for an if you're in an operation, you get targeted with a mechanic where you're just going to take a couple hits to the face. Force Barrier comes in handy to mitigate that damage. You can use it as a defensive cooldown, so it's very effective. Now, on the last tier, the most important one here is going to be Force Mobility. This is the only one that I consider to be mandatory. Force Mobility is definitely mandatory because you want to be able to toss your Innervate, your best heal, your most important go-to heal while moving. It's huge. You know, if you're leveling up and you don't have this, you'll know when you do get this, you're going to see how much of a big difference it is. It's just amazing being able to activate your go-to and your best heal while moving. It is night and day difference. This is mandatory. Everything else is kind of open and subjective to playstyle. A lot of these are PvP related, so if you do more PvP, you know, this is kind of PvE focused guide, so keep that in mind. But this is the only one that's mandatory for sure. Everything else can kind of be accommodating to your playstyle and whatnot, but this is mandatory. Shapeless Spirit, another damage reduction thing. Reduces how much damage you take from AoEs, and also reduces damage while you're stunned. As you know, there are some mechanics where you will be stunned and getting hit, and there's really nothing you can do about it if your Unbreakable Will's on cooldown, or if it's a mechanic where Unbreakable Will doesn't even work. This is good to have. 30% damage reduction is huge. It's a lot, so that's good. And then the second most important one I would say is probably Galvanizing Cleanse. I can't tell you how many operations I run with other healers that do not cleanse, aka expunge. You know, you'll have your raid frames up and you'll see someone that gets a debuff that needs to be cleansed or needs to be expunged, and a lot of healers just don't and leave that debuff on there, and it sucks because a lot of boss mechanics, like if you're in an 8-man boss mechanics, they'll throw out 2 of those because there should be 2 healers, and the mechanics are made for one, you know, you and another healer to expunge. That's why they throw out 2, because there's 2 healers, and a lot of people don't. I wish more people did, so that's one thing. But yeah, expunge should be something you are using constantly, and when you do expunge cleanse, it'll make your next ability with an activation time instant. This can only work 30 seconds, every 30 seconds, but still very helpful. You know, that way you can go ahead and expunge someone, and then you can throw an instant heal on them if you need to. It's really good cooldown, because expunge you should be using all the time. Okay, a lot of people don't be that fucking guy. Be fucking expunging. When you see shit light up, you know, and if you have issues seeing stuff, adjust your UI. Okay, like I have my operations frame here. Yeah, operation frame here, and if you look at the debuff scale here, I have it cranked up. That way when someone has a debuff that I need to expunge, it's pretty big and pretty noticeable, so you can't miss it. I recommend doing that if you're having troubles or you're not good at expunging. Go ahead and scale that debuff up a little bit. It'll kind of be a flash, flash in your face, remind you to expunge that shit. Don't be that guy that doesn't expunge. Alright, good. Alright, moving on. The next thing I'm going to talk about is some of our offensive stuff. So, like I mentioned earlier, Affliction I have as my #1 spell on here, because basically the first thing I do when engaging any fight or any target is I like to throw up my Affliction. If there are weak and normal targets, I will also throw in a Force Storm in there, because our Force Storm actually stuns weak and normal targets. And if you pool with 4 or 5 guys and they're normal or weak targets, and you throw a nice Force Storm in there, they're all going to be stunned and stuck on stupid, and you'll be doing good damage, and you won't need to heal because the guys ain't going to be hitting no one because they're going to be stuck on stupid and stunned. So I really use this a lot when doing flashpoints. When there's pools with a bunch of guys, just throw a couple Force Storms back to back, keep those guys stunned and stuck on stupid, and no one should be taking damage. and you really just clear shit quicker. So Affliction, I always throw up on everything. The best defense is a good offense, right? If you are killing shit and they're dying fast, then the faster they die, the less healing you need to do, right? On bosses, I will also throw up Crushing Darkness. I will keep my 2 dots up on the boss. Obviously, when there's no healing to be done, obviously I would never prioritize, DPSing a target over healing. Your job is to heal. You are the fucking healer. So you heal first, and you can easily throw up these 2 dots and leave them up and ticking, contributing to the damage, thus ending the fight and encounter quicker, than getting it over. It's better on your force, it's better on your healing. Faster a boss dies, more efficient you are, and the less you have to heal. So those 3 are my go-to for DPS for those reasons. Electrocute, I got bound to my Shift 4. Same concept, right? If you pull a couple guys, you can quickly just throw off an Electrocute, tab target one, throw off a quick Electrocute. A stunned mob is a mob that is not hitting someone. Or if you have aggro on a mob and a mob's punching you in the face, throw an Electrocute on them, maybe overload, bash them away, and step away from them a little bit, right? Again, stun mobs, knockdown mobs are not mobs that are doing damage. So if they're not doing damage, then you don't have to heal, and you can contribute in killing and DPSing and making your life easier and the encounter faster. With that being said, we'll move on to some of the healing now. So for being a healer, we don't really have a plethora of heals. Basically, you have 3 heals that you're going to use basically 99% of the time. Innervate is our go-to heal. It is by far our most powerful heal, our most efficient heal, and it is our best heal because every time we crit with it, and it procs 4 times, excuse me. So when you use an Innervate, it does 4 ticks on a target, doing massive healing, and you can move while channeling it from putting your utility point, like we talked about earlier, which is super important, being able to move while channeling this heal. And we get Force Surge procs. So Force Surge procs give you a light up right here on Consuming Darkness, and when you use this gives us force back. So you can basically throw out a bunch of healing, drain your force, and then easily get it back just by hitting this button. Our healing is kind of like a rotation per se. I know this is a healing thing, and technically there's never a rotation for healing, as it's reactive and not proactive. But there kind of is with the Sith Sorcerer, because Innervate is our best heal, which you should be always using on cooldown. I mean, even if a target doesn't need healing and no one needs healing, and you have, no procs up, just throw another Innervate just to get some procs built up. I didn't crit right there, so that's a terrible example, but the point is you want to use this as much as possible, get your crits up, because whether you need mana right now or not, there are mana, of course, right now or not, you will at some point in the fight when healing gets intense and you're forced to throw out a lot of healing. So building up those procs and keeping those procs full is just an all-around benefit. I basically never have this up. I try to use this spell as much as possible and then consume these stacks in between when healing is needed. You don't want to pop these obviously when someone's about to die, but yeah. So that is our single target, most powerful, most efficient heal that allows us to have unlimited force, because every time you get a crit on that, you get your force back, and rinse and repeat, get your force back. And with that rotation and doing that style, you basically have unlimited force. As long as you stay conscious of your procs and you don't forget to use your Consuming Darkness procs. I actually have it mouse bound, so it's easy for me to fire these off. I have it on my mouse. I just click on my mouse and pop these off whenever there's a healing downtime or where someone doesn't need a heal, get my force all the way back up. With Recklessness, it guarantees that your next healing is going to crit. So say for example you're low on force, you could easily pop Recklessness and then Innervate, and it's going to guarantee that you get 3 procs right there off that Innervate. It's going to guarantee that. So when you're low force and you need some force, you can pop a Recklessness and pop out a massive heal because they're all going to crit, and you can just boom, 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 and just like that you have most of your force back. Just like that. So Sith Sorcerer is very powerful, very, you know, mana force sustainable as long as you keep using your procs and stay on top of that. There is one other time that these procs are used for. They also can make our Revivification, which is our ground target AoE heal. They can make it instant cast and more powerful. In 5-man content, I never use Revivification. It just doesn't heal for that much. And in 5-man content, or 4-man content, I should say, wrong game, too much WoW playing. You know, you're only going to hit 4 targets, and for the amount it heals, it's just not worth it, and it's just not efficient. In 4-man content, we have a group heal, and that's going to be Roaming Mend. That heal bounces to multiple players and heals them for a really good amount. It's basically our multi-target heal. If anyone, if you have any more than 1 or 2 targets that needs a heal in the group, you're going to want to use Roaming Mend. It's a little weird the way it works. So you put it on a person, and then when that person gets healed, then Roaming Mend bounces around, healing various other targets. So what I do is I literally throw a Resurgence, which is our heal over time. I throw a Resurgence on the person, and then immediately follow up with a Roaming Mend. That guarantees that your Roaming Mend is going to bounce around to your other group members immediately. So kind of the way that works, put a hot someone, then Roaming Mend them, and then it will bounce around to your group members. You can see it bounces someone way out there. This is a little weird because I'm not in a group, so it's kind of going to be on control. It's going to bounce around anywhere. But when you're in a group, in a raid, that's what you want to do. You Resurgence the person, then use Roaming Mend, and you will see it bounce around to your group and raid or operations members. It does a lot of healing. It is very powerful. That is another combo that you should always have on cooldown. You should always want to use this as much as possible. It's very efficient for the cost. Very powerful heal. So you just Resurgence someone, and Roaming Mend them, and you will see that heal bounce around and do a bunch of healing. Very powerful. Once I started using this healing correctly, healing on the Sith Sorcerer became so easy because there was a lot of times where multiple people need heals, and it was kind of, a struggle to keep up, and our ground target heal, again, not very powerful, and it relies on players standing in it. So using this combination of Resurgence and then hitting the person with Roaming Mend so it bounces all around, super powerful, super efficient, and it does a lot of healing. Once you use that combo effectively, you should have no healing issues. Resurgence itself is a heal over time. It also does an initial small heal. So if someone needs a little healing, that's usually my go-to healing because it does do an initial tick of a fair amount, and then it'll continuously, tick them for quite some time. But those are the 3 heals that you're going to use the most. Those are your 3 bread and butter heals that you should basically lean on 90% of the time. Our ground target, Revivification, I do use that in operations. Now, in operations, that's a whole different story. This spell is very effective in operations, very powerful in operations, because you're going to be healing 4+ people, and that just makes a night and day difference on the effectiveness of this heal. So 4-man content, it's whatever, but in operations, you're going to want to be using this heal a lot. It's really powerful because when you add up how much healing it does when it's hitting 8 people instead of 4, it's a lot better bang for the buck. But outside of operations, I hardly ever use this heal. With, our bouncing heal, there's just really not too much need for it. So Dark Infusion and Dark Heal, these 2 heals, again, are kind of used in a combo situation. If someone needs burst heals, like if someone's taking a bunch of damage and your Innervate is down, your Roaming Mend combo is down on cooldown, You can hit them with a Dark Infusion, and that will make your next Dark Heal instant. So that will quickly allow you to bring someone back up to health. So you can Dark Infusion them, and as soon as it hits, your next Dark Heal's instant, so you can literally hit them back to back with both of those. Boom, boom, and they get a lot of health back. Those are basically the O shit buttons. If someone's about to die, you throw a bubble on them, and then that'll give you time to fire this combo off and basically get them back to full health together. So Static Barrier is our bubble. That's also one of our go-to spells for Sith healing. I basically pretty much only use it when I know there's going to be a lot of damage outcoming. So like if there's a boss mechanic where you know he's going to hit the whole group or do a bunch of AoE damage, you can kind of preemptively go and bubble bubble up some group members. That way, as soon as the boss does his mechanic, you know, the first few ticks or the majority of it will just get ate up by the bubble, and you know, no one really loses any life. Other than that, the only time I really use it is on myself when taking damage, and I use it as a pause button when someone's getting wrecked. So if someone's taking a bunch of damage and they're really getting bursted down, and I'm not sure if my healing is going to be fast enough to save them, then I will bubble them and then hit them with all the healings. You know, 5, 6, and then 7. You know, back to back, just like that. Do a large amount of healing, but basically the bubble's going to be your pause button, so you can ensure that they're going to live that next 2 or 3 seconds, which will give you that time to fire off whatever heals you need to fire off on them. It's like your little pause button there. Other than that, that's basically how I use that ability. Just don't forget to use your Consuming Darkness procs to get all your mana back. So that's basically the healing covered right there. When you're in trouble on yourself, these are the 2 abilities that you're going to use when you're taking aggro. You're going to use Cloud Mind. It's not amazing, but it lowers threat. And if you grab the utility points that I spec'd in, it also... Let's see here. It should also reduce the damage you take as well, right? Yeah. So Cloud Mind already reduces aggro, but if you grab this utility point here, it will also increase your damage reduction 25% for 6 seconds. So that's huge. You know, if you're getting hit, easily just bubble yourself, throw a Cloud Mind, and then you throw an Unnatural Preservation, which does a large amount of healing to you, to yourself only, self-only heal. Those 2 abilities are your basically keep you alive abilities. If you're ever in trouble or if you're ever getting hit, you have aggro mobs, use those abilities in conjunction together, and they will save you and hopefully drop your threat, or at least reduce the amount of damage you're taking enough and heal you enough to where you're no longer really in danger. Just bubble yourself, Cloud Mind, Unnatural Preservation. Those are your go-tos whenever you're taking damage. We have a couple cooldowns here. Unlimited Power and Polarity Shift are going to be DPS cooldowns, as well as allowing more throughput for healing. So whenever you need some extra DPS or extra haste, or extra throughput, these are going to be your cooldowns that you pop for the group, or to assist. Force Barrier is another self-preservation. It puts a bubble on you and protects you, but you cannot, it's basically channeled, so you cannot really do much when you're under the effects of it. It's good if you're doing any operations and there's a mechanic where a boss targets you, where it's something you have to run out and take a hit, and it's unavoidable damage. You can just run out of the group and pop a Force Barrier and negate a lot of that damage and then go back to what you were doing. Same thing if you get aggro. If you get aggro and you're under fire and you've already Cloud Mind and you've already had Natural Preservation, I use these a lot more because the cooldown is a lot shorter and they're more effective. Let's say you pop those and you're still in danger, you can always Force Barrier. Just keep in mind it is a channel thing, so obviously you're not going to be able to throw out any other healing or do anything when you're channeling it. So I don't really use it too often, as most of the time you're still going to need to be healing and remain your healing uptime I tend to just either throw a bubble on myself and use Cloud Mine on Natural Preservation, and then I can continue healing and keeping the people alive, which is what our job is in the first place, right? But it does have some limited uses. Force speed, I keep mouse bound because you are going to need this ability basically all the time. The run speed is going to help all the time, whether it's running something out of the group for a mechanic or just keeping in range of a tank. If someone's taking damage, they run too far out of range, you could easily force speed to them and get in range to heal them, or any ability like that. That covers basically all the abilities. Whirlwind is another cooldown ability. It basically is like a sleep sap mechanic ability where you put a target to sleep, but if someone damages them, it interrupts it and you can't redo it for another minute. So there's a lot of times where people just freaking AoE like crazy, or they'll just hit the target or whatever. So as much as I would like to use this ability, I usually don't, because people end up breaking it. So unless you're on the same page with the people, tell them, don't break my fucking Whirlwind, right? Phase walk, that's something I should talk about. There's going to be some fights, mechanics maybe where you might want to line of sight something, or get out of, get out of a certain area, and that's what phase walk is. It's our little teleport. You basically put a target on the ground, and then you can be over here doing whatever you want to be doing, and then the boss does a mechanic that says run out, and you fire off phase walk again, and it takes you back to your safe spot. It has a 1 minute cooldown again, so there's not too many uses for it, but there is some times where you can leverage that on certain boss fights. So I recommend keeping it handy. It comes in handy sometimes. I think that covers everything. Extraction yanks your target to you. I don't really use this very often because it pisses people off, so don't be that guy that uses extraction and yanks people. I mean, no one really appreciates that shit. If you're skipping mechanics, or you're skipping shit in flashpoints and whatnot, and some guy can't jump up on a ledge or can't get around a certain thing, then you can use an extraction to yank them, help you. But I don't recommend yanking too many people off. If you like yanking people off, that's your deal, but I'm not big on yanking people, so. Reanimation is our battle res. It can be used in combat. Keep that handy. If you screw up and let someone die, or they screw up by standing in the fire, then you can easily battle res them. It's your res you can use in combat, so keep that handy. And that covers all of the abilities we got here. Unbreakable Will is your get out of CC. It will get you out of CC, stuns, things like that nature. Jolt should keep handy. It's an interrupt. I mean, typically we hope DPS and tanks will be on interrupt duty, but it doesn't hurt to have that handy and know where it is in case they are not interrupting for whatever reason. And Force Slow, don't use this too often. Again, with the utility point, that makes my Affliction slow the target, and I always have Affliction up on every target that I engage. Yeah, don't use this too often. But that's everything explained. That covers everything. Yeah, that covers everything. The only other thing I could think of here is Stims. Use Stims, okay? Even if they're just the ones bought from the vendor, you can just straight up buy them right here in the fleet from this droid. There's two different stim. There's the two that are best for us. There's a Mastery Stim and Power Stim. And if there's a time where you know you're going to be taking some damage, or you want a little health buffer / barrier, there's a Fortitude Stim. Give you a little more hit points and a little more defense. These are two stims. They last an hour. They do not proceed through death. You can only have one active at a time, but try to use one or the other. Don't be that guy that's just lazy and cheap ass who doesn't use them. Other is Med Pack. I use this sometimes. It's good to have, as an oh shit button. If you've already popped off on Natural Preservation and you already bubbled your stealth and you're still about to die, it's not bad to have one of these things handy. There's been some times where it's saved my ass in a pinch. So keep that handy. But that is basically it. I think one thing I forgot to cover on the gear was the tactical slot. So for the tactical slot, the two best tactical items I think are the Life Warden. It's kind of self-explanatory. It basically saves your ass if you're gonna die. It can only happen once in a 10-minute time, so it's on cooldown for 10 minutes after it saves your ass. But hopefully you're not bad enough to where you need your ass saved more than twice in 10 minutes. This is kind of like, I kind of use this when I don't really know what I'm going into. If it's content I haven't done before, and it's just good to have in your back pocket because it will save your ass from dying. It does give you a very large heal, and it will definitely save you one time. So if you're not super confident or you're going into some content you're not sure about, this is definitely the go-to tactical item. The other tactical item that I recommend is going to be Endless Barrier. It lets you basically bubble yourself twice, so you can bubble yourself, and then when you normally can't bubble yourself again from the debuff that bubbling gives you, the blah blah blah, if you use Unnatural Preservation, which is your self-heal, it will remove that debuff and you'll be able to bubble yourself again. So it basically lets you bubble yourself twice in a row. And it has no cooldown. However, Unnatural Preservation does have a cooldown of 30 seconds. So basically it lets you bubble yourself twice in 30 seconds where, you know, normally you wouldn't have been able to back-to-back bubble like that. Once this is back up again, then you can use it again effectively. It's very good. It will also save your ass. But if you want some ass saving without any, you know, intervention, the Life Warden is good. It will save your ass from dying, and you don't have to do anything. It will just save your ass. So definitely recommend that until you are doing some content that you're very comfortable with. But most of the time this is my go-to one, just because having a get out of jail free card always up is never going to be a bad thing, right? Alright, I think that covers everything. I was going to cover some miscellaneous stuff real quick here for the end of the guide. For my companion, it doesn't matter, you know, the companions are all normalized, so they can all heal, tank, or DPS. But a lot of people say that, you know, being a healer, it sucks to do quests, or it sucks to do solo play. And in this game, it really doesn't. Because if you set your companion to damage, your companion will actually do a lot of damage. My companion really kicks shit. My companion really wrecks shit pretty hard. Like, I'll do heroic quests, heroic missions on these planets for gold and whatnot, and I just turn my companion loose on damage spec, and she just destroys stuff. And all I have to do is occasionally heal her while doing some damage myself. So it's really not painful questing, soloing, and doing stuff as a healer. Your companion will do a shit ton of damage, and you only have to heal her every now and then, and you can supplement her damage with your few damage abilities. Excuse me there. The second thing I want to cover, because when I started trying to re-roll my stats and work on my gear, my mods, I found out that this shit costs a lot of fucking money, and it eats your money alive. So I was trying to figure out how to make money, and running heroics, the heroic missions on planets, is a good way to make money. It's probably one of the best ways to make money. However, there's also some crafting items you can sell on the auction house or global market or whatever the fuck it's called. And those items are... let's see here. So if you do, you know, if you're in a guild and you're doing your conquests and all that stuff, you're going to be getting some of these solid resource matrix. I'm not sure about other servers, but on my server, these things sell for about $1 million a pop. And I found that I had like 20 in my bags. So I went and sold some of these for about $1 million a pop. and made an easy 20 million credits. So if you're hurting for money, that might be a way to help you get some money. It sure was help for me. I was able to get like 20 million gold or credits real easily, and I was broke ass before that. Because getting gear, you know, a lot of times you'll run stuff and you'll get pieces, you know, like these or whatever, and then you're like, hey, I really want the mod out of this gear, so let me remove that mod, and then it's like, hey, it's gonna cost 1,000 credits. So that really sucks, and that can add up really quick. So getting some money is definitely very important and needed to get your end game and your gearing and get all your amplifiers re-rolled to the best stats and whatnot. And same thing with augments. Those are also going to cost a lot of money unless you make your own augments. So with that being said, I am doing synth weaving. I'm going to try to make my own augments with synth weaving in archaeology. So I'm currently leveling that up. Again, that also costs money to level that up and do the missions. And once you get to 600, I think you have to pay $500,000 to go beyond 600. So yeah, money. But that covers everything that I want to cover for this guide. Feel free to hit me up or look for me in game if you have any questions or anything I can help on. Check us out. Check out the Still Court. Awesome bunch of people. If you're looking for a good experience, it's definitely the place to be. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace!